It's I look forward to hear his talk. Please welcome Minsuk Cho. I'm just going to use this. Yes. That's okay.
반갑습니다. 조민석입니다. I'm going to speak in English. Thanks for a kind word, Laurent. I'm an architect based in Seoul, and I'm not going to show you any latest technology. I'm by no means expert in that, and I'm involved mostly in the most sort of old-fashioned field among creative field, which is architecture. But it involves a lot of things I think happening around now, especially all those profound changes initiated by this whole digital realm. So my title is Decompress. It was in response to the title, Serious Fun. And I realized actually it's a pretty good title because actually architecture involves with, it's all about organizing materials and matters, but also organizing serious and fun matters, fun activities. So I looked at the topic, and then you can go a lot of ways about it, of course, and you have all the choices you want. You can either choose one way or the other, or you can choose maybe both simultaneously, or you could get really confused with it. Also, it's a very exciting, or sometimes the serious fun is quite questionable. And sometimes maybe you have to slash it and you have to separate these two. So, I mean, what we do as an architect is actually try to balance things out, and we actually go by the problems in a very specific, the case-by-case way. So first of all, I want to talk about, I want to make a little bit of an observation about the serious part, especially involved with this region, Asia. This isn't usually excuse the statistics that I bring up always as being an architect of this in this time and age, which means that over the last 100 years, the entire human population quadrupled. That means 3/4 of places we call home was quickly produced over the last 100 years. Half of it was produced more or less over the last 50 years. So when you think about it, all the human civilizations over thousands of years, with hardly any left, and we had to quickly produce, so this massive amount of sort of work we had to do. So I think the Korea is a prime example. And 50 years ago, entire country, the ratio between urban to rural, non-urban was a 20 to 80. And 50 years later is inverted, so 80 to 20. And I think we can pretty much say where we are kind of presents, or at least typecasted as a fun part, and the other part, especially near Seoul, is a serious part, which is only growing. So what happens when, meanwhile, is that we find ourselves one of the hardest working countries in the world. The statistics shows that Korea, when you consider generously like 30 years as a working year, then when America works for 30 years, Korean works for about 40 years. And among developed countries, Netherlands is the least working country, and when they work 30 years, we work about 50 years. And why we are working so much for that is actually for serious architecture. And this is what we're talking about. This is about serious lifetime commitment, serious investment. It came out about 80 years in Germany, was a social housing, and then ideology completely changed and it took over, but also it works in Pyongyang, also in Seoul. Only the Pyongyang has a better color scheme, I think. Hong Kong has more about the more like a steroid version. Also, surprisingly, as we know, is a suburb of rich people in China. Is what Hong Kong is turning into. A lot of empty trophy apartments. Okay, so what happens for the fun? How then? What happened during this serious architecture? What is the fun architecture like in Korea? Instead of Europeans, a lot of Europeans here, instead of who gets about 4 to 5 weeks a year for vacation, for Korea, most young people here probably get 1 week a year vacation. So we developed this one-day architecture for fun. It looks like this, and it's reachable from about 1 hour distance. Of course, you have to drive there by car. Usually 1 day or half day. It's all about somewhere exotic, fantasy world, being alien, sometimes really quaint, quaint in a kind of a Western way. I'm not gonna go over the details. Sometimes it's erotic, strange, erotic again, and so on. This is a crab restaurant. This is great, actually. Love is for the date people, young people, two houses in love. Also, sometimes it gets really sophisticated and surreal. So when I compare these two, serious architecture, these bunkers or parking lots stretched vertical, and the fun architecture, one is about center, one is about 1 hour away center, blob box versus blob. One is about generic, normal, brutal, maybe boring. The other one themed, abnormal, shameless. One is about official, one is about with your wife and your serious commitment to your family. The other one is about maybe your mistress and secretive activities, and so on. And one is about making money, it's a serious investment. The other one is you go spend money and waste your life. And one is about paranoid conversion, one is about going crazy, schizophrenic, divergent. One is here and now, the other one is everything and everywhere other than here and now. And then to go to a little bit less micro scale for the even busier, more the harder working people, there's a 1 hour, there's a 1 day architecture, and then there's a 1 hour interior space. Usually happens around this kind of suburb of Korea, which is even more denser than Seoul. It looks like this. It started out as a generic sort of box, and then it becomes completely like this shamanistic, colorful programs. It's adult-only computer room, beauty salon next to church often, and then goes with the cosmetic surgery and 노래방, karaoke, and so on. And 찜질방 is one of those megaplex of these kind of places that where you don't have, I often do that myself, that in the middle of the day when you have to go away, I take a 1 hour vacation at the 찜질방. You can pass out, you can exercise, you can even do yoga courses. They have a 노래방 also, or meetings and so on. Love Hotel, of course. This is also exciting because Korea is so busy and everything is so dissected that 1 day is divided into 6 parts, so you can rent for 4 hours segment. So you finish whatever you have to do for like 20 minutes, and then 2 of them jump to the computer because they're so addicted to spend the remaining 3.5 hours. This is the entry, secretive. All these private enclaves of these micro spaces for the people to get zoned out, to escape. I'm not going to get to all these the brilliant inventions of these things, but this is where the midlife sort of married men go crazy alone with the computer and phone somehow. Okay. And then to go to a little more extreme, we have a 1-minute vacation. You probably know, I mean, earlier today we talked about it. Korea is the #1 internet user, high speed #1, and so on. So I just talked about Korea being the hardest working hours, but at the same time, they spend most time on the internet. So somehow mathematically, it's not possible, but actually you realize it is possible because you multitask, you do that simultaneously. So you could be sitting at one place, sort of work to death and entertain yourself death, going back and forth. Every 10 minutes, you have 1 minute vacation. Of course, you have to be psychologically equipped to that, to the sort of ADD state, attention deficit disorder. So this is how we get so confused with this sort of the demand, kind of initiated from the quantity. So my title, Decompress, is actually, it's more about specific solution as an architect. One is about sort of creating the less compressed state, sort of spatially, so which we call a mass matrix studies. And then the second one is about temporary decompressing. So we call it a mass movement studies. I'll get to that. Spatial decompression. This is a house maybe 100 years ago. This is how we compressed our city, ever expanding vertically. And we call it Apart Republic, as you know, Koreans. And it's we also call, compared to chicken houses. I mean, nowadays, you know, people talking about ethical way to raise chickens and animals to be slaughtered and so on. And people are treated like chickens here. So it's actually literally like this. We try to find a way to kind of create some open space. It's very difficult because it's all about kind of really maxing out things, the whole capitalist sort of a city. global city. This one is called eroded matrix. I'm just going to go through it quickly, and then I'll show you the website address at the end. So basically, the idea is that it's an office space. Almost each office space has a small terrace with trees, actually. It's growing now. The other one is much larger. It's sort of a luxury office style, we call it missing matrix. It has various sort of a smaller scale outdoor spaces where you can maybe interact and you can feel intimate. Although this is a more than 100-meter tall tower, inevitably is beyond human scale, but we try to kind of find a way to do that, to create some kind of an intimacy. The third one, we call it a bundle matrix. Is also it's pretty self-explanatory, I think. We create these bundles structure system and then create some open space, hopefully with some social interactions and so on. It's actually almost complete. Next month, people will move in. And also, it creates interesting sign V, which is kind of a Korean youth. When they take picture, they always do that. So it's kind of friendly, decompressed sort of gesture, instead of being this sort of a compressed oppression, oppressive box. And the next one is we're asked to imagine 20 years from now. Exhibition was 2006 and we started 2004, so it's been quite a while. Almost outdated vision of our future. Our idea of year 2026 was that statistics shows that people will live alone, more and more people, because it's evident that, especially Korea, people make less babies and people will be living longer, so we will be very old country soon. We all know that. So idea was that instead of building a tower that has sort of the same apartment stacked up, you'll have a very small place on your own, private space, almost like a hotel room. So you own it because in Seoul it's so expensive to own anyway. And then this bulbous part is where you share with others. So that instead of this kind of a typical floor is stacked up, you get these sort of variations. So instead of that, this homogeneous sort of a repetition, you get this sort of a private. Also, you get the better sun because it's very not so deep. And then you get this higher ceiling and much wider floor area for social interaction. And you can reserve, you can also view and you can pick and choose your own life, basically. So idea was this was a tower, and you have this full spectrum of various scales of spaces, private and public, shared. This is a plan, and it will, this is like MRI scan of the building. So that was that. And then, of course, we talked about green, and I think this is the sort of the one example. We actually built this all green building. But also we can imagine the whole city actually, the building high density tower doesn't necessarily mean that actually is taking away green. So I guess we're hoping that is a sort of our positive imagination of how the serious and fun goes together, not this kind of a monoprogrammatic bed town which will be wiped out and get replaced by higher condominiums and towers, but more complexity, let's say. And then in between movement, matrix studies and the last half, the movement studies, I'll show you some other project which deals with how serious and fun we felt that we're compelled to be separated. We were asked to propose something for Guggenheim Museum, so Rotunda space, famous iconic building for the 50-year anniversary. Like people like Nam Jun-baek had a solo show. We are nowhere near that famous. We are one of the 200 artists and designers and architects who would be presenting their work next year as a group exhibition to celebrate a 50-year anniversary. What we realized was that museum was initially meant to be reflecting artwork, and it was actually a serious place. But then, thanks to the Frank Lloyd Wright, building became this really iconic, and over the 50 years, it turned into a zoo. So it became like a marketplace, and you can't really see any art there. It's really frustrating that how serious and fun could be, a combination could be really annoying. So we thought, but also initially the Frank Lloyd envisioned also like a nice resting space in the middle, but now it's packed with a queue line people. And also the rest of the floor is all sloping. This is what made it famous, it's a one spiral. So there's no place to rest. So how do you solve this two problem? So initially we imagined people could be maybe sitting by the, the handrails, too dangerous. So we kind of came up with a way that maybe we put up a ladder and then we have this almost like a massage chair-like chair, and then people can sit on it. And then they have this membrane, almost like a safety net to protect people. So people could be hanging, and each tourist who are not really bothered to see art, they could just enjoy almost like a theme park, and almost becomes like this Baroque ceiling painting. And then allowing the real art goers get engaged seriously with art. So that was our serious/fun proposal. And then we go back to the temporal decompression for the last 7 minutes. Mass movement studies. Basically, this is the norm, or this is the modern city and building, and this is what we're trying to do. One example. Modern city is all about this almost Fordian sort of organization of movement, how everything is neatly, in a most rational way, shortest distance from one way to the other. This is when it's tower, basically. Either you go to the basement parking to park and take the elevator up, but you have to always find your numbers. It's not really about locations, but it's all about, it's a non-space with the numbers or some signages. And when it becomes city, we basically live in a city like this, most modern city, the 80% now. And this is more like American version, maybe low density, but still has that logic. So we were also, it's in a way like when architecture is a 4D, or at least 4D art, like it deals with the time. And these are sort of typical linear progression, tree-like structure. And we were actually more interested in actually more web-like structure. Maybe you're more familiar here, the hyperlink or the other sort of how the people engage with internet. I mean, also this is a famous Oleg picture in Jeju. It's ironic that people fly here to get an experience of just walking kind of aimlessly, purposelessly, for the purposelessness. So in a way, maybe and whenever we had an opportunity for commission in the city, we try to create this sort of diverse choices. So one of the early examples was a subway passage where they're asked to design some movie gallery. We and younger digital filmmaker in Korea came up with suggest that they can actually stay there and maybe engage other activities. So they actually decide to kind of work on the street. So there's some part has a video bang. Of course, this is only for the art movies, but also they have an office and they have a small mini screening room for 50 people and so on. And I'm not going to go through each details, but papsang is a Korean meal table. Maybe unlike the Western meal or other kind of a course meal, other culture, Korea usually put everything on the table. So you can pick and choose your own course meal. So everybody sit around same dinner table, could be eating completely different way, different sequence and so on. So this building is actually, you started out having a choice of 3 different directions to go, either to the rooftop level or mid-level or below. And then between those levels, there's more than 2 ways to connect. So you actually end up exploring. Even when you go to same building, you could be also experiencing very different things. So these are all similar exploration. This one wasn't built, but I'll just go through it quickly. This one is probably the most largest one that we have built so far. This was a model house, type of a more 주택문화관, housing cultural center. And this is a 4-leveled, quite large building. And also you can just imagine, I'm sure there's a mathematical way to figure out how many trajectories you can get, almost human being the pinball, and possibility of moving around and pick and choose your own sort of activity and experience within there. Also, it worked, this building of this typology also had a very unpredictable nature. Sometimes it sort of packed with thousands of people, sometimes it's empty, so there's a lot of room to be improvised. So these are some of these, almost like a landscape. It's almost like your kind of like a mountain and valleys and so on. And then last night over dinner, JW, 이재훈님, was trying hard to make sure that reason why I'm not here, why I am here has nothing to do with 다음. And so I have to mention that I'm showing this, which has nothing to do with, but although it's quite evident that I have logos everywhere, so I try to avoid it. But I cannot help showing this because I think it's one of the great art I have ever seen recently. The Harubang, web surfing Harubang. And we were engaged with their vision, and we've done the master plan, and we're still working on the first building that will be built in their campus. And as you can see, there's a staggering statistics for between the Seoul and Jeju. Actually, Jeju-do itself is like 3 times larger than Seoul City. That's shocking. And then maybe in terms of population density, is almost 600 times Seoul is larger in terms of density. So I talked about this matter, and then I talked about what is currently the inversion, and then maybe within 10 years or so, the non-urban will almost disappear in Korea. So 95 serious and 5% fun. I mean, when you sort of typecast it, I think this radical move is actually quite compelling, because when I see it actually, when you see this 5% as a serious place, let's say the worst case, this is your walking hell. I mean, Jeju seems to be pretty good. And then also the interesting thing is how the soul becomes a fun part. It's almost like I have to share my personal stories. I used to live in New York, and when I was living there, it was like really impossible. I mean, I love the city and all the richnesses, but I realized also I was taking all the abuses that city was offering. And then now I moved to Korea 7 years ago. Now when I go back, I get to only do fun things, and it becomes I kind of newly discover, also appreciate what that city can offer. So I'm sure maybe along these lines they'll experience that. So this is the location of this virgin land next to the Jeju University, and this orange part is their campus. And this was what was given, not drawn by us, but their vision of the city's vision, which in a way a little bit scared me, because this was a Google picture. Of course, inside this campus, it will have that kind of a creative environment, culture, fun and seriousness together. But urbanistically, as planning-wise, actually, this was sort of remind me of these kind of what the urban is called office park type of typology, which is the sea of cars, and then these buildings are floating like an island. And not only Microsoft, but also CIA headquarters, same thing. And these are the sort of a typical sort of American invention, I would say. So we suggested actually creating the difference, creating like a 2 contrasting zone which complements each other. So one is maybe rural, one is urban. Again, this is a typecast, formal, informal, blah, blah. And then maybe one is fun, the other one is serious. The other one is serious and fun, vice versa. So you have to have a difference to appreciate the other. And almost the way how Seoul and Jeju has its dichotomy, maybe within, almost like a microcosm that within there also has these 2 differences. And also as a way to create openness, we need a place to have a density and more exciting, more compressed urban condition. And then these are the sort of a site is also unique. It's not flat, so it's 800 meters, and it drops about 60 meters. So it's actually almost 15-story tall buildings height. There's a very 3-dimensional quality to it. So we have a parking sort of halfway hidden half basement using the sort of slope. And then maybe there's this what we call, and you end up getting like this yellow zone is like 800 meter long, which is almost same length as the Insadong Street. Almost this sort of a new kind of urban sort of street happens. And then one of the first building that we're doing is actually, we're creating this loop, because I don't believe in any like this enclosed but also like a contained part. Everything has to flow well, especially when you're about communication and this productive, creative environment. So it's actually we end up creating almost like a movement that is more than 1 kilometer long, and maybe at the end we will compete with the Olegil. So this has been a study, and I'm not going to get into details. We're still working very hard on it, but maybe hopefully next time, maybe you come, you can see it. So at least we're escaping that, so that's a good start. And then just lastly, I'm showing you how some Japanese scientists experimentation with this isolated, enclosed, simple environment and then rich environment, and then they kind of looked at how they develop the brain cells. So in a way, the town people for us is kind of the guinea pig for this kind of our experimentation, but I hope it will turn out well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minsuk.